Stop, listen, pay attention. This is not background noise, and it is not another message you can casually pass over. Chosen one, this moment asks for your full awareness, not because something terrible is coming, but because something important has already happened, and you are standing inside the aftershock. You have felt it as fatigue that sleep did not fully repair, as pressure that lingered even when nothing obvious was wrong, as a quiet isolation not from people, but from easy explanations. You showed up, you kept moving, you handled responsibilities. Yet something underneath felt tight, compressed, as if an unseen weight had been pressing without ever announcing itself. This message is not here to alarm you. It is here to bring clarity. There has been a convergence in your life recently, a narrowing of space, a stretch of days or weeks where things demanded more of you internally than externally. You may have questioned why simple tasks required more focus, why rest felt incomplete, or why your patience was being tested in subtle, repetitive ways. None of this was random, and none of it was meant to overwhelm you. What you experienced did not look dramatic from the outside. There was no visible collapse, no public unraveling, no obvious crisis. That is precisely why it matters. You remained functional. You stayed present. You did not break apart, even when the pressure did not let up. That stability is the signal, not the struggle. You are here because this message is intentional and personal. It is not aimed at a crowd. It is aimed at you because your nervous system, your emotional regulation, and your inner structure responded in a way that revealed something about who you are underneath effort and intention. You did not have to summon strength loudly. It was already there, operating quietly, keeping you coherent while invisible constraints loosened and fell away. You may not have labeled it at the time. You may have simply thought, I'm tired, or this phase is heavy, or I'll get through it like I always do. But something shifted while you were doing exactly that. Something that does not announce itself with noise. Something that does not need belief to function. Stay with me. What follows will explain what occurred, why it registered as pressure instead of drama, and why your response mattered more than you realized. There is no ambiguity about who this is for. This message is not for everyone who feels tired, pressured, or reflective. It is for you because what occurred did not just pass through your life. It interacted with your structure. Chosen one. You were not a bystander to this moment. You were the point of contact. You may not consciously identify as someone with unusual strength. In fact, you may have spent years assuming you were simply enduring, adapting, coping like anyone else would. But the defining feature here is not how hard it felt. It is how you remained intact without needing to dramatize, collapse, or escape. Something that would normally destabilize people instead revealed a quiet resistance in you that does not require constant effort. This is where identity locks in, not through labels, but through evidence. When pressure increased, you did not become erratic. When uncertainty lingered, you did not lose coherence. When isolation showed up, you did not abandon yourself. These are not personality traits you turned on. They are baseline qualities that operate automatically without negotiation. Many people believe strength is something you consciously summon in moments of crisis. What happened with you was different. You did not brace yourself or prepare for impact. You simply stayed functional. Your system absorbed strain and redistributed it without shutting down. That is not learned in a single season. That is built over time, often without recognition. This is why this message is direct. You are not being invited into an identity. You are being reminded of one that was already active. The chosen one designation here is not mystical or inflated. It describes someone whose internal stability is higher than their conscious awareness of it. Someone whose resilience does not depend on mood motivation or external validation. You may have noticed that while others around you reacted strongly to far less, you stayed measured. While others needed reassurance, you stayed oriented. While others externalized stress, you internalized order. This does not make you superior. It makes you specific. It means your system is designed to hold tension without immediately converting it into chaos. What matters most is this: you did not choose this response consciously. It happened through you. That is the difference between someone who struggles to stay upright and someone whose balance is already calibrated. You were not fighting to remain steady. You were steady even while acknowledging the weight. This message is for you because what happened required someone who could remain present without needing to understand everything in the moment. And you did. Without ceremony. Without recognition. Without breaking your stride. There is one symptom you recognized immediately, even if you never named it out loud. A persistent heaviness that did not fully qualify as anxiety. A low-grade tension that stayed with you even during calm moments. You may have interpreted it as stress burnout or emotional fatigue. You may have wondered why it lingered when nothing was actively wrong. That interpretation makes sense, but it is incomplete. This was not a flaw in you. It was a signal. You were not malfunctioning. You were registering pressure before it reached a visible threshold. Your system detected constraint compression and resistance, not as danger, but as information. That is why the sensation felt vague and difficult to explain. Signals that originate beneath conscious thought rarely come with clean language. You may have judged yourself for feeling slower than usual, less enthusiastic, or less socially available. You may have questioned why your motivation felt muted or why you preferred quiet over stimulation. But nothing was wrong with your drive. Your system was reallocating energy toward stability, toward holding form, toward maintaining coherence under conditions that required it. When people experience this kind of pressure without internal structure, it turns into panic, irritability, or avoidance. In you, it turned into containment. The sensation stayed internal because your system knew how to hold it without discharging it outward. That is not suppression. That is regulation. You did not need to fix this feeling because it was not asking to be removed. It was asking to be understood. It was an indicator that something unseen was shifting, tightening, and then beginning to release. Your awareness picked up on the transition phase, not the event itself. This is why rest may not have immediately resolved it. Sleep restores energy, but it does not instantly recalibrate perception. Your mind stayed alert because it was tracking change. Your body stayed slightly guarded because it was adjusting to altered conditions. This is what adaptation feels like from the inside when it happens quietly. There is no self-blame required here. You did not overthink. You did not imagine things. You did not fail to relax properly. You responded exactly as someone with deep internal monitoring responds. The discomfort was proportional to sensitivity, not weakness. You may also have noticed moments of sudden clarity mixed with moments of dullness, brief insights followed by a desire to withdraw. That oscillation is not confusion, it is integration. Your system was processing information faster than language could keep up. What matters is this: the symptom passed through you without distorting your identity. You did not become someone else under pressure. You remained yourself. That tells us the pressure was external to your core, not a sign of internal instability. Hold that understanding gently. You do not need to assign meaning yet. You only need to release the assumption that something was wrong with you. It was not a problem. It was a signal. And signals make sense once you see what they were pointing to. What you were responding to was not imaginary, and it was not self-generated. There was invisible pressure present, structured, and timed, and it intersected with your life in a way that tested stability rather than strength. This did not arrive as chaos. It arrived as compression. The pressure was subtle by design. It did not announce itself through obvious conflict or dramatic disruption. It showed up as narrowing options, delayed clarity, repetitive obstacles, and a sense that forward movement required more internal alignment than usual. These were not isolated inconveniences. They were coordinated in their effect, converging around the same period, creating a sustained demand on your internal regulation. What matters is not the existence of pressure, but how you met it. You did not become reactive. You did not fragment. You did not abandon your responsibilities or lose your sense of orientation. You continued functioning even as the environment felt tighter than normal. That combination is rare. Pressure often forces people into extremes. In you, it revealed steadiness. This confrontation did not require confrontation in the traditional sense. There was no argument to win, no force, to oppose, no dramatic stand to take. The pressure tested whether you would remain coherent while not fully understanding what was happening. And you did. You stayed present without demanding immediate answers. You stayed grounded without needing certainty. Timing matters here. This was recent. It occurred within a defined window, not spread randomly across years. You may be able to trace it back to a period where multiple things felt slightly off at once. Not broken, not alarming, just persistently demanding more internal attention. That clustering is not coincidence. It indicates intent and structure, not chaos. You were not meant to fight this pressure. You were meant to remain functional within it. And that is exactly what you did. Your routines held. Your judgment stayed intact. Your sense of self did not erode. Even when energy dipped, your core remained stable. That tells us the pressure was testing load-bearing capacity, not trying to provoke collapse. Many people mistake invisible pressure for personal failure. They assume if something feels heavy, they must be doing something wrong. You did not default to that conclusion. Even if you questioned yourself briefly, you did not internalize blame. You stayed neutral, observational, and adaptive. That neutrality is not passive. It is disciplined. This is important because invisible pressure only reveals itself through response. There are no witnesses, no external markers, only the way someone holds themselves while it is happening. You held yourself with consistency. The confrontation is already complete. Not because the pressure disappeared instantly, but because it did not succeed in destabilizing you. It moved through your environment, applied force, and then loosened. And you are still here intact, clear, and functional. That outcome is the information. Now we break this down carefully, not to dramatize what happened, but to understand how the pressure touched different points and how you stayed regulated through each one. This matters because what you moved through was not a single experience. It was layered. First, there was doubt, but not the loud kind. It did not show up as panic or spiraling thoughts. It appeared as subtle questioning. Small pauses where you checked your decisions more than usual. Brief moments where certainty felt slightly muted. Many people unravel here. They overcorrect, seek reassurance, or abandon their own judgment. You did not. You allowed doubt to exist without letting it take control. You evaluated, adjusted where necessary, and kept moving. That is not indecision. That is internal stability under review. Second, there was fear, but it was quiet and abstract. Not fear of a specific outcome, but a low-level sense of vulnerability, a feeling that something was at stake without knowing exactly what. This kind of fear often drives people into avoidance or impulsive action. You did neither. You acknowledged the sensation without inflating it. You did not rush to escape it or numb it. You let it pass through your awareness while staying anchored in your daily life. That ability to feel fear without obeying it is a form of mastery most people never develop. Third, there was energy drain. Tasks required more effort. Focus took longer to lock in. Rest helped, but not completely. This is where many people begin to self-criticize. They assume they are lazy, unmotivated, or failing. You did not turn on yourself. You adjusted your pace. You conserved where necessary. You prioritized what mattered and released what did not. You did not force productivity at the expense of coherence. You protected your baseline. That is not weakness. That is regulation. Fourth, there was isolation, but not loneliness in the social sense. It was the feeling that others could not quite track what you were experiencing. Conversations felt slightly misaligned. Advice felt irrelevant. This often leads people to over-explain themselves or withdraw completely. You did neither. You remained connected without demanding to be understood. You stayed present without oversharing. You trusted your internal compass rather than outsourcing clarity. That quiet self-trust prevented fragmentation. Fifth, there was delay. Not denial, not failure. Delay. Outcomes took longer. Responses were slower. Doors did not open immediately. This is one of the most destabilizing pressure points for people because it challenges their sense of progress and worth. You did not collapse into frustration. You did not interpret delay as rejection. You stayed oriented, understanding intuitively that timing was part of the process, not a verdict on you. You maintained patience without resignation. That balance is rare. Across all of these categories, notice what did not happen. You did not lose your sense of self. You did not become reactive. You did not externalize blame or internalize shame. You did not need constant reassurance. You stayed internally coordinated. This is important because pressure reveals habits. It exposes default responses. Under strain, people become more of what they already are. In your case, pressure revealed containment, adaptability, and self-regulation. These are not emergency responses. They are built-in systems. You did not fight these pressure points aggressively. You did not try to dominate them. You simply did not let them reorganize you. You remained the reference point. That is the key distinction. The pressure moved around you. It did not move you. This section is long because retention depends on recognition. As you hear each category, something in you nods quietly. Not because it was extreme, but because it was accurate. These were everyday experiences layered in an uncommon way. And you handled them without fanfare. What you demonstrated here was not endurance through suffering. It was internal order under load. And that is the kind of stability that does not announce itself until after the pressure is past. Now there is space to review what occurred without emotion distorting the analysis. This is the phase where understanding replaces effort. You are no longer inside the pressure. You are looking back at it with enough distance to see its shape. When you examine the sequence honestly, one thing becomes clear. What happened cannot be explained by chance mood or temporary circumstances alone. The consistency of your response across different stress points rules that out. Random stress creates random reactions. What you displayed was coherence. That points to internal structure, not coincidence. You did not get lucky. You did not simply have a good week of resilience. You maintained orientation across uncertainty, delay fatigue, and ambiguity. That kind of continuity does not appear suddenly. It is the result of an integrated system that knows how to self-correct without collapsing into extremes. Look at how you processed what was happening. You noticed the pressure without dramatizing it. You adjusted without abandoning your values. You questioned without eroding your confidence. You rested without disengaging from responsibility. Each of those responses required subtle internal coordination. None of them were reactive. They were measured. This is where many people misinterpret their own strength. They assume strength should feel powerful, decisive, or energized. What you experienced felt quieter than that. It felt like holding steady, like staying upright without needing to announce it. That does not look impressive from the outside, but it is far more reliable than bursts of intensity. Remove explanations that involve coincidence. Remove explanations that rely on external rescue or timing alone. What remains is your internal resilience, your ability to stay aligned while conditions were misaligned, your capacity to hold ambiguity without forcing resolution. That is not accidental. It is not situational. It is part of how you are built. Notice also what did not leave residue. You are not carrying trauma from this period. You are not disoriented now that it has passed. There is no lingering chaos. That tells us your system processed the pressure cleanly. Nothing was suppressed. Nothing is waiting to erupt later. The cycle completed. This is confirmation, not celebration. It is an acknowledgement of reality. You encountered sustained internal demand and remained coherent. That outcome speaks for itself. You do not need external validation to lock this in. The evidence is already present in how you feel now. Calmer, clearer, more centered than you were during the pressure itself. Understanding arrives when strain leaves. And now that it has, you can see that what you moved through did not weaken you. It clarified you. When you compare your response to what is typical, the difference becomes quietly obvious. Most people under far less sustained pressure lose presence. They become reactive, scattered, or emotionally flooded. Their attention narrows. Their behavior shifts. Their identity becomes conditional on how safe or supported they feel in the moment. That is not a criticism. It is a common human pattern. Pressure overwhelms regulation for many because their internal stability depends heavily on external conditions staying favorable. Your experience did not follow that pattern. You stayed present. You continued to think clearly enough to make decisions. You did not outsource your grounding to constant reassurance or distraction. Even when things felt heavy, you remained functional in your daily roles. That alone places your response outside the norm. This is where rarity enters not as elevation, but as statistical reality. It is uncommon for someone to maintain internal coherence when pressure is prolonged, subtle, and unresolved. Acute crises sometimes mobilize people temporarily. Ongoing low-grade pressure usually erodes them. You did not erode. Many people collapse internally long before anything visibly falls apart. They become irritable, disengaged, or numb. You did not. You remained emotionally available without being emotionally volatile. You stayed aware without becoming hypervigilant. That balance is not accidental. This does not mean you felt nothing. It means your system could contain sensation without being reorganized by it. That distinction matters. Feeling deeply while remaining stable is far less common than feeling intensely and losing structure. If you look around, you will notice how quickly others destabilize when outcomes are delayed, when clarity is missing, or when support feels uncertain. They rush to conclusions. They force action. They abandon patience. You did not. You tolerated ambiguity without turning it into a personal failure. This is not superiority. It is specificity. Your nervous system, your emotional processing, and your sense of self are calibrated differently. You do not need constant certainty to remain intact. You do not require immediate resolution to stay grounded. That is why this comparison is not about ego. It is about accuracy. Under similar conditions, most people would have experienced visible breakdown. You experienced internal compression and remained whole. That outcome is uncommon. And rarity does not demand recognition. It only asks to be acknowledged, so you stop underestimating the quiet stability you carry as your baseline. Now we clarify something essential, because misunderstanding it would distort everything that came before. What you demonstrated was not activated strength. It was not a special mode you entered under pressure. It was your baseline. You did not rise to the occasion. You remained who you already are. This matters because many people believe resilience appears only when summoned, as if strength is a switch they flip in emergencies. In your case, there was no switch. There was no internal speech convincing yourself to hold on. There was simply continuity. Your inner structure stayed intact because it is built to do so. That structure was not formed overnight. It is the result of lived experience, repeated self-regulation, and moments where you learn to stay present without external reassurance. Over time, those moments integrated into something stable. Not rigid. Stable. Flexible enough to absorb pressure without losing form. This is why the pressure did not feel like a dramatic battle. It felt like weight, and you carried it without identifying with it. You did not confuse sensation with identity. You did not assume that discomfort meant danger. You did not interpret strain as a signal to abandon yourself. Those distinctions are marks of maturity, not intensity. There is nothing supernatural required to explain this. Inner coherence is a real measurable phenomenon. It shows up as emotional regulation, consistent self-reference, and the ability to tolerate uncertainty without fragmentation. You exhibited all three without conscious effort. That is the identity clarification. You are not someone who becomes strong when tested. You are someone whose default state already includes strength discernment and containment. Pressure simply made it visible. This also explains why you may sometimes feel out of sync with environments that thrive on urgency drama or constant stimulation. Your system does not need chaos to feel alive. It values alignment, pacing, and internal order. That is not detachment. It is integration. Lock this in gently. There is no need to announce it or prove it. Identity that is real does not require performance. It only requires recognition. You do not need to wait for the next challenge to validate this. The evidence is already behind you. You stayed whole under load. That is not something you activated. That is who you are. Now the task is not to analyze further, but to integrate what you have realized into how you move forward. Integration is quiet. It does not demand drastic changes or heightened vigilance. It asks for alignment. First, allow yourself rest without guilt, not collapse, not withdrawal. Rest that respects what your system has processed. Your body and mind carried sustained internal load. They completed the cycle cleanly. Rest now is not avoidance. It is completion. Second, practice discernment without suspicion. You do not need to scan your life for hidden pressure or anticipate the next challenge. Simply notice what costs you energy and what restores it. Your system already knows how to signal imbalance. Trust that. Respond without overthinking. Third, reinforce boundaries through clarity, not force. If something consistently disrupts your internal order, you are allowed to adjust your proximity to it. You do not owe constant access to your attention or emotional space. Boundaries are not defenses. They are design choices. Fourth, maintain patience without passivity. Delay did not destabilize you before, and it does not need to now. Continue taking the next clear step without demanding full visibility of the path. Movement rooted in coherence is more effective than urgency driven by uncertainty. Fifth, return to focus gently. You do not need to push yourself back into high output. Let focus rebuild naturally around what feels aligned. When your system is regulated, attention organizes itself. Trust that process instead of forcing it. Finally, remember balance. You do not need to become hyper-aware or overly introspective because of what you learned. Integration means letting understanding settle into the background while life continues. Awareness should support your functioning, not consume it. You are not meant to carry this insight as a burden or a badge. It is a reference point, something you can return to quietly when pressure appears again. You know now that your baseline holds. This is emotional closure, not an ending. You are not bracing for what comes next. You are oriented, grounded, and capable of meeting it as you always have. Without noise, without strain, with internal order intact. Take a moment and notice where you are now. The pressure has passed, and you are still here. Not depleted, not disoriented, present. That alone is reassurance. Nothing followed you out of that season that needs to be fought or undone. You are not recovering from damage. You are standing in clarity. What matters most is this simple realization: you did not lose yourself under strain. You did not fragment when answers were delayed. You did not abandon your center when things tightened. You stayed coherent. That is the core truth. Everything else is detail. Let that settle without analysis. You do not need to keep revisiting the experience to extract more meaning from it. The meaning has already integrated. It shows up as calm, as steadiness, as a sense that you can move forward without rushing or proving anything. There is no warning attached to this message. No threat, no demand, only confirmation. You are stable in ways that do not depend on circumstances being ideal. You can trust your internal order. It has already shown you what it does under load. Hold on to a few simple affirmations, not as mantras to repeat endlessly, but as reference points you can return to when needed. You are steady even when things are unclear. You remain yourself under pressure. Your balance is not fragile. If this message resonated, mark it quietly. In the comments, leave 777 or write "I remember," not for visibility, not for us, for acknowledgement. A signal to yourself that you recognized what this moment revealed. If you want to stay connected to messages that speak with this same clarity and grounded understanding, subscribe. Not because you need guidance, but because recognition strengthens when it is reinforced over time. There is nothing urgent you need to do after this video ends. No decision to make immediately, no conclusion to force. Simply return to your life with the awareness that your baseline holds. You are not waiting to become stable. You already are, and that is enough.